Good afternoon, Edge fans, and welcome back to Barcelona. We're here midway through day 3 of our 4 days of live coverage on theCUBE. My name's Savannah Peterson. Really enjoying sharing the conversation today with Dave Vellante. You know what's interesting about the show that I was thinking about in our wee break we just had? It's a lot of passion right now. I mean, between our dialogues today, but even from all of our guests.
Yeah, we just had a great conversation with Carolina, who's a very passionate individual.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of tech passion in the air.
Yeah, I love the way you just said that. Yeah, there's a lot of tech passion in the air, and I think it's really interesting because it's been less of a speeds and feeds conversation and much more of a solutions-driven conversation. And I think there's really no one more interesting to talk to about some of the cool new innovative solutions getting out there in the hands of real people than Chris from ARM. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you, Savannah. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that intro.
Yeah, hey, absolutely. I mean, you walk into Mobile World Congress, the audience isn't able to see this, but there's literally big LED billboards that say MWC is powered by ARM, which is pretty cool. And it's not a joke. I mean, I can imagine even for you walking around on the floor, do you see your devices that you're inside all over?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we're very fortunate to be the place in the ecosystem that we are. But what's cool is just to see, with the base computing elements that we're providing, what people are building on top of that, right? And because our ecosystem is so diverse and so capable.
Yeah, I mean, you're across industry, you're across devices, you're across solution. I mean, you really are everywhere. It's no joke. Do you have you noticed, at least at this show in particular, any particular category really exploding or innovating more so maybe than we've seen in the past?
Well, I mean, I know that AI is probably something that,
I haven't heard anyone talk about it this week at all.
Yeah, and this is the problem, right? I think we're getting a little bit of AI fatigue, but it is interesting for me just to, I mean, I don't even know, I think I told you, my first MWC was the first time I was in Barcelona when we moved it from Cannes, and I think it was 2007 or 8.
You're an MWC OG for sure.
Yeah, but just go back to last year, and when we said, oh, what was AI and what were the AI workloads? I mean, then only 12 months later, they're very different, or they're very much more advanced, and all those kinds of things. So I think it's just been exciting to see the different takes. Plus, obviously, when you come to a global show like this, you see, kind of in different areas how AI is evolving different ways, because different cultures need different things, different ecosystems are growing in different ways. So it's been fun to kind of see some of those applications. So I think that's probably the most fun part.
Do you have a favorite? I realize that's impossible, but you can, you don't have to say it's your favorite forever, but maybe you're personally most excited about?
Well, one of the things, we've gone through this whole XR evolution, right? Where VR, AR, we call it XR now. There was obviously a huge hype cycle, right? And but we're starting to really see some really cool capabilities, right? And one of my favorite products, I was an early adopter of it, but the ARM-powered Meta Ray-Bans, right? So that is our product. Have you seen it? The camera, they have the two cameras, the voice, and now they've added AI capabilities. That product it just hits this really nice sweet spot where people are like, well, it's not really AR because it's not projecting anything, but no, now it's using voice, right? To communicate with you. They're streaming to the cloud. You can do, now they've got the ability to have us do search, what am I looking at? And that product is at this point in time, the top seller in 60% of the Ray-Ban stores here in Europe.
Wait, compared to all the shades?
Compared to all the shades, #1 seller in 60% of the stores. So that is a mainstream technology that's evolved just in a few years.
And really reached consumer and commercial adoption in a way. That is a wild stat, holy moly. So do you think, because some would argue, and I think we've seen quite a few very big companies fall flat when it comes to AR and VR. You look at the Apple Vision Pro, it did not sell like they thought it was going to sell. You look at some other stuff. Do you think that those glasses specifically are going to help be a gateway for more people to interact with that type of technology in general because it's so easy to throw on a pair of sunglasses?
Well, I mean, I think wearables are more difficult, right? Especially, I think, like watches, everyone's wrist is pretty similar, and of course we've seen different sizes. when you get into wearables like glasses and stuff, you're dealing with a lot of other things. And so I think, you know, Meta has really done a great job with their Luxottica partnership.
The partnership was key.
So, I mean, you know, again, it's about how do you take these technologies, and when you go into these verticals, you can't go into them like you're selling yet another PC or another smartphone or something like that. These verticals have unique capabilities. I think you see that in medical devices, you see that in wearables, you see that as technology infiltrates all of these different technologies, you know, you need to, it's a blend of what it takes to be successful in both of those, and sometimes as technology companies or technology innovators, we're just like, oh, this is going to work. And you're like, oh wait, I didn't think about all those other factors.
Google Glass. But yeah, no, I think, but you also have to take, I mean, the Luxottica partnership you just brought up is really important, and I think that other companies will benefit with edge devices by partnering with traditional fashion brands, wearable brands, whatever that might be, because you can't just make tech able to go on your face, you have to make it something that people want to wear on their face.
Yeah, yeah.
And the same thing goes for our devices.
Yeah, but on the other side, the cool thing that's happened is, again, another thing that I think technology's changed, and you know, whether you want to compare Tesla to your traditional car, it's also something once you procure it, it gets better and better, right? We keep making software upgrades, and so, you know, the fact that, you know, they were using an ARM-powered, you know, CPU complex, et cetera, we were able to bring AI now to the headset without
them having to buy another device. So you're inherently future-proofing by having components like you and partnerships like that within the device. That's a really big deal, because you don't want to feel antiquated or outdated and not be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. I mean, to be fair, because AI, as you know, takes a lot of computational requirements.
Does
it takes and you know, and memory, and there's just a lot of pressure on the whole computing subsystem.
Yeah.
So we definitely try to put as much as we can in, and how do we bake as much in? But with AI, it is a struggle, and that's why I think really a hybrid kind of on-device AI plus cloud augmentation is what you're going to see, but we'll keep putting more and more down on the AI, but it's going to continue to get more difficult, so it'll be a balance.
I think you're absolutely right about that, particularly with the workloads, there will be a balance. Speaking of workloads and edge, I'm really curious. We just recently did some research and put out a report on AI PCs. What are your thoughts on the AI PC and some of the applications that are going to come along with that?
Well, I mean, I think if you're specifically talking about in the Windows environment, I think Microsoft's done an amazing job with Copilot, right? Just Satya has just driven that company to be cloud first, driven that to drive, you know, and their Copilot Plus. I mean, there's been some starts and stops, but they're on the bleeding edge, and that's just what happens when you're there. So I think the productivity gains are coming. I mean, I think, again, we're in this, you know, in some ways I'm like, man, we're in trouble because people are just not feeling that AI is delivering that much, but you are starting to have some of these transformational moments, I think. Like, I go back to like the first time you use Safari on a mobile phone versus some of the WAP browsers, right? And you're like, oh, this is mobile internet, right? This can work.
That's a great example.
I think we're just starting to get to some of those on AI. You know, for me, just the simple meeting summarizations at the end of a Zoom meeting or an end of a Teams meeting, and just the fact you get, you know, something that would have taken me 20 minutes to create relative to great meeting notes or whatever, you know, and I probably wouldn't have gotten into it for a day or that evening or whatever.
If you did get to it. And I said that lovingly. No, the summarization is like, understand, that was kind of my gateway drug, was Otter AI, to realizing how much this was going to be easier for us to realize, to do more better, which I think is what we're all trying to do.
And boom, all of a sudden it's out to even the people that didn't make the meeting, right?
Right.
So I think when we talk about like, oh, the power of a virtual meeting, well, now we're starting to see that a virtual meeting is almost better than a live meeting, right? You know, so.
But the summary's still not there yet, right? Because what you get is a fast summary that sometimes hits the point, sometimes doesn't. So you have to squint through it, but it's going to get better.
There's still a human in the loop, for sure, but yeah.
Yeah, and in the human in the loop might cut down 20 minutes down to 10, right? Because but a lot of times you just let the meeting notes go, and it's like, got to get those key points in there.
For me, it's actually really dramatic. I think it's actually a lot different than that, especially with action items or creating a full strategy or launching a plan or a campaign plan.
I find it misses a lot, but I'm confident that it will eventually, you know, get to the meat of what, at least what I, as the meeting agenda holder want to accomplish.
Yeah, and I bet there might be an interface there where you can interact with that to then help modify that to.
Well, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
like,
to
can
make
I
it
tell
what Dave
the AI,
wants from
hey,
his
mark this because this is the important point.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that we were chit-chatting about our vacation beforehand. Like I don't need to see that in the notes. I mean, just little things like that.
Yeah,
if I could interact, and that's coming.
Yeah, and I think to me this is just the gateway, right? Because again, you think about enterprises have to be comfortable with their data being available in these systems, right?
Yeah.
And I go back to like smartphones. Remember when people were like, well, can you bring a camera phone into your workplace? Like that's a problem, right? And today we laugh at that. Like, what do you mean you can't bring a camera phone? Every phone has a camera, and whether it was a concert, you couldn't bring camera phones into concerts.
I really forgot about that in the IP craze era of not wanting people to take pictures of work documents.
So you just think now as enterprises get comfortable, and again, we had to structure the data right. We had to make sure that the data was protected and all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, as you start having all that enterprise data that's now available, that basically is AI searchable and AI queryable and all that kind of stuff, you're just going to see this explode. So, and that is back to your question. I think AI PC is a great starting point, and where people are going to get a lot of changes in their workflow and just make their life better. And the example I like to use is...
Yeah, I was going to say, give us some examples of how you think that's going to happen, because I've been asking, and I asked Michael Dell the same question. I'm curious to see what stories are going to pop up and surface and really help make the interest and adoption become more ubiquitous. We're going to need to see the magic before we just buy a new PC.
Yeah, I think you're gonna see those use cases just start kind of coming up and saying, wow, I'm a lot more efficient than I was. I go back to just even cloud documents, right? And versus I'm working on version 1.0. Wait a minute, I made my edits.
You take it.
I got a hard refresh. Yeah. Even editing like in WordPress or something. Yeah.
So I think you're going to see more of that. Some of the ones that I've had shared with conversations with people was, they were creating documents. They had international people that we're working with that were basically typically would create all of their work in their local language, and then they would translate that, and they would have people translate it so that could be consumed in English or whatever, because they're basically writing a report. Well, now they actually just have prompts. They have AI prompts, and they go through, and that's how they write the document. And their efficiency has gone up tremendously relative to...
And the accessibility of that information. Your knowledge graph, everything you're able to communicate, whether that be externally or internally within your organization, all of a sudden becomes adaptable. And that could even be done in the same way for visually impaired or for, folks who are hearing impaired. I think, there's a lot.
I want to dig back into the edge strategy. When I think about some of the great innovations in our industry, I mean, the original database, which maybe Oracle didn't invent, but they kind of won the database wars. I think about, certainly Intel with microprocessor. I think about VMware and virtualization. When I first saw that, I was like, wow, this is going to change the industry. My point is, it brought so much incremental value. In some cases, it was cost savings, like in the case of VMware. In other cases, it was just whole new industries were formed, in the case of Intel. But after it gets mature, people say, oh, well, we got to pay these guys. And I think about ARM. ARM basically created the fabless model. Maybe it didn't create it, but it popularized it. The ability to get the tape out now is so much more compressed than the typical x86 cycles of 3 or 4 years. And so we're seeing amazing innovations there. And then people wake up and they say, well, yeah, but we got to pay ARM licenses. So you see things like RISC-V come out with open source. And you see this opportunity in edge. ARM has such tools, great, robust ecosystem, a mature platform. So I'm interested.
They got all the good stuff.
But I'm interested in how you see this opportunity and how ARM is going after it and the juxtaposition of that, open, free like a puppy, and what you're seeing in the marketplace in terms of, obviously adoption's amazing. You mentioned Tesla. I mean, I think of that as an edge use case, and then many, many others beyond the enterprise. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I think that, from our point of view, it is a ubiquitous computing platform, right? And I think just like we've talked about this, this idea of edge to cloud is just continues to happen, right? And I think you guys had Mohammed on here on Monday, right?
We did.
And it's pretty interesting because obviously ARM's, legacy, our 30+ year legacy is around power performance, right? And when people think power performance, they think handheld devices. And again, one of the first most famous devices was the Apple Newton, right? That used, one of the earliest ARM processors. And then Nokia and Nintendo and all those kind of devices, Game Boy and all those devices. So, but what we've seen now is that ubiquity of the interest in kind of the power performance. What that has given us is just a tremendous amount of developer reach. So at this point in time, there's about 20 million developers that are actually developing on ARM. And so that's just a tremendous footprint.
Yeah.
And so what we're really honestly focused on, Dave, is how do we make that as capable as possible, right? We've moved recently, last couple years, to our V9 architecture. V9 has been a lot about taking the next generation of computing, both from a security point of view and also from an AI acceleration point of view. And we're just continuing to evolve that and really trying to make that as frictionless as possible for developers. Because I think if you look at the markets that are just demanding all of this computing, that's what they're looking for, is really looking for that breadth and capability. So that's how we're attacking our opportunity.
And the other piece of it, which maybe is not as visible, but is probably just as important, is the wafer volumes coming out of the factories on ARM dwarf anything else on the planet. And as such, the cost to actually manufacture the silicon is much lower than competitive platforms.
Well, I think we do get a lot of leverage out of that for sure, right? And we obviously work with the leading foundries on making sure that we're optimized for their latest process, and our partners obviously can take advantage of that. And that's actually one of the things we've been doing lately is we've had our compute subsystems, our CSSs, and I think Mohammed talked about that too. But that's really about, okay, how do you get to market as fast as possible, and how do you do so in the most efficient and cost-effective way? Because not only is it the time to market being important, but as you know, the cost of development, the cost of these new mask sets are increasing tremendously. So the cost of a B0 spin, which maybe not only costs you tens of millions of dollars from a mask set point of view, but could cost you 8 to 9 months time to market. These are huge kind of shifts. So we're just trying to accelerate that, and because of our breadth, we're really able to leverage that across the board.
And when you switch process nodes, wafer number one is not cheaper, And so you have to have that volume advantage in order to switch S-curves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think but those S-curves do come, right? And so and again, many of the markets, right, that we participate in, there's a portion of the market that goes quickly, and there's a portion of the market that trails, right? And so you also have that kind of effect even inside of markets where absolutely the latest and greatest smartphones are using the most bleeding edge nodes. We also still participate in a big way in some of the other markets where, again, basically they're on an N-1, N-2 kind of a node. So you get a full distribution.
Where you're already down the cost curve on those N-1, N-2 nodes, which again, I guess I'm describing the back end of your flywheel.
Yeah, well, but that's where really also, I think that's what's magical to me about the silicon ecosystem and kind of the way this works, because those N-2s provide an amazing amount of innovation or disruption to emerging economies, right? And this is one of the things around back to the AI thing. We did an announcement on Monday with our partnership with Stability AI. And Stability AI, people may know them for stable diffusion, but they create all these different models. Well, we created a model with that. We took their text to audio model where you can put in, I want a xylophone playing whatever song at, so many beats per minute. 7 seconds later on the ARM V9 CPU, your file shoots out. You can attach that to a clip. And you can do this on any ARM-powered
7 seconds.
7 seconds later.
That's really compelling.
Well, it used to take like 4 minutes on a high-end GPU, but that's a statement about how far we've come in the last year with these models and the capabilities.
Awesome.
And then you combine that with the ubiquity of the ARM CPU, and Now you've got, you know, and if you just think about these expert models and putting them in these environments where, you know, the schooling system is not as strong, or this is the first connected device, but, you know, that connection is, you know, not always the best connection, or maybe the connection is when you go to the coffee shop and get you have Wi-Fi. But if you can put an expert, just the way you can query that, the way you can learn, I just think we don't understand how the democratization of AI could impact just society as a whole. I mean, as much as we get hyped up about AI and we're getting sick of it, it is something that we will look back on and say, this was amazing.
Well, and I'm really glad you brought that up with a focus on people who have not traditionally always maybe had the most access to the frontline technology du jour, right? And I think that is something that's really different. I think this is why the relationship between edge and AI is so fucking magical, is because we're gonna have people who are able to create, to build, to secure, to help their community, whatever that might be, that never could have had that, because we're able to create the device that processes that information, that handles that workload at an affordable, scalable fashion, which is really what you guys are known for.
Yeah, and you see it across the board, right? I think at CES, right, Jensen announced Project Digix, right? Which is, you know, 20 of our latest ARM cores combined with a petaflop on your desk, you know, petaflop of AI computing.
We all had a moment at CES when that happened, I think, without question.
So we've got it across the spectrum, but you're right. I mean, we're going to look back and say, wow, look at all these things, and then it's going to be magical, I think, in many ways, and it's going to be, I think, great in many ways. And of course, there's the pluses and minuses, but we'll have to figure out those checks and balances.
What's your base case assumption, going back to AI PCs? Because Savannah and I have talked about it a lot. You wrote a piece, you're basically saying that this is going to replace the browser. I'm like, thank God, you know. You know, finally, we got some innovation beyond what we had in 1993 and before. What's your base case scenario for that steep part of the S-curve for AI PCs?
Well, I think that AI PC penetration is going to be very, very high, very, very quickly. I don't remember some of the analyst reports, but I think they're talking well north of 50% very quickly.
But within what, 12 to 18 months kind of thing? 12 to 24, let's say?
They're talking like 60% by 2027.
And that's kind of, is that sort of a forced march because everybody's going to have that in their portfolio?
I think that the PC has a unique opportunity because the cost of putting in AI that's relatively performant is not very high.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You generally have if you think about what AI takes, right? You need a pretty good memory footprint, and then you need some good computational capability. CPUs are good, GPUs are better, and then NPUs can help augment that as well. And so you kind of have all that coming together in the base PC. So I think for that market, you see a different adoption curve just because of that.
It's like good gas mileage in cars. You're just going to get it.
Well, and you get a better performing machine, and that's one of the low key things. So you've got 1.5 billion laptops right now in the commercial and consumer arena.
That's the install base?
That are due for a refresh in the next 5 years. Now, if I am buying a new laptop for my team or for myself, am I going to buy the laptop that can't handle the workloads and the fun creative stuff I'm going to do in the next few years or not? 1.5 billion laptops alone, just looking at that sector, that's a lot of machines, that's a lot of hardware.
And you're saying the incremental cost is not that great, so competition will keep prices
You're going to be spending, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from my research, you're going to be spending equivocally what we've been spending on these, but you're going to be getting a superior machine that's more future-proof and less likely to be needing to be replaced as quickly. It's the same thing like with those updates to the Meta glasses that you were talking about. You didn't have to go buy another piece of hardware. It was built with components that are that are adjustable essentially, or then can evolve over time.
Some future-proofing, bring it broad in there. I think the thing though that is, the reason why I think we can do that is that today's PC is leveraging so much of what we've actually pipe cleaned in smartphones, right? So if you kind of think of a post-COVID world and you think about what the PC experience is all about now, you know, people care deeply about the camera subsystem, right? Because when you're on a conference call, if you don't want to turn your camera on, I'm kind of like, wait, why not? What are you doing, your laundry? Or like, why is your camera not on? pre-COVID, I never turned my camera on, right? So now they want an amazing camera experience. They want amazing multimedia. Well, guess what? Smartphone camera evolution has been amazing what we've been able to step in there, right? Now, what do people want? They want all-day battery life, right? So they don't want an 80-watt TDP. They want, you know, super all-day power rate. They want fanless. They want all kinds of multimedia acceleration. This is where the PC industry's gone, and the fortunate thing for ARM is that, guess what, ARM's ecosystem, that's what we're good at.
Yep.
Right, that is what our good at. Our ecosystem builds the most power efficient, most performant multimedia SoCs on the planet, and that's why we're so optimistic about what we think the PC opportunity is for ARM.
And not to get quasi-technical, but can we talk about the NPU? Because our friend Bob O'Donnell says, you know, you look at the AI PCs today, it's all the GPUs sucking up all the resource, and the CPU, the NPU's not getting utilized. And my sense is that's maybe an architectural issue, that because I know with Apple, you know, they're getting great usage out of the NPU, certainly from a power standpoint. Can you add some context to this and help us understand, like, what's going on underneath the hood?
So I think that, you know, we need to look at the different elements in different ways. We talk about something called heterogeneous computing when we think about, even in a device, right? That term gets used for different reasons.
Meaning like a hybrid CPU, GPU, NPU?
Exactly,
okay.
And so what we're very much focused on, how do we make each of those elements as performant as possible for AI workloads? So we've done a lot of work on our V9 architecture and beyond, on making that super performant for AI. We've also done a lot of work not just on the hardware, but on the software. We talked about the developers. Last year we launched our Clyde AI, which is a framework that's now been integrated into many of these computing frameworks, like XNNPAC, if you're familiar with Android or the like, which now basically when that software hits that library, it actually takes advantage of the latest V9 capabilities to accelerate, and even capabilities that maybe we haven't launched yet. And so when that hardware is capable. So you first think about the computing element. Then Bob's right, you think about the GPU. GPU has tremendous flexibility, and as these models are changing, that becomes very attractive. The NPU absolutely drives the best tops per watt. So if you think about tops per watt, so when you think about use cases where you very much have a lot of throughput and you care about tops per watt, that's where it's going to shine. Smart cameras are a great example. If you think about doing low power, facial recognition, all those kinds of things, really, really good. The challenge we have with NPUs is that there's not necessarily a great programming framework, and it's very hardware specific. And so this has been one of the things that happens in this accelerator world. And so I think that's what we need to kind of work through. So for first party, so for the software that ships with a system, it's fairly easy to optimize that for the NPU and make that a good experience, and that includes the OS and things like AI Core or things like Copilot that are shipping with it. The challenge is for third parties, and so if the hardware keeps looking different, or if I have to worry about what I'm targeting, that's a headwind, that's some friction there, and so we need to figure that out, and I think that's not been a solved problem at this point in time.
So that's a developer abstraction layer that simplifies the ability maybe for...
Could be. The challenge we have right now is the models don't abstract. There's a lot of dependency because of kind of Amdahl's law and the way that these AI models kind of propagate, so it's not a solved problem yet.
It's a problem though I think a lot of people are working on, and you brought up a good point. I want to bring up that stat you just dropped on the devs real quick, and then I'll have two more questions for you. 20 million developers on ARM. I just did a little quick Google here. There's only 30 million developers out there. So you're telling me 2/3 of the world's developers are working on ARM?
That's our latest understanding, yes.
That is really impressive. That's also got to be an incredibly complex challenge when you're thinking about what the developer experience is going to be across all of those instances. I mean, holy moly, I can only imagine the outliers and data points and things that you have. What's the process like internally? Because one of the things that is most beloved about you is your developer experience. What is that process like internally for you, and how you get feedback from those developers and pull that into that experience and that UI?
Yeah. So I think this actually comes back to one of Dave's earlier points about just how broad ARM has been from day one, right? So we kind of just have this in our DNA that we are developing for a lot of partners, and it's not just some internal thing where we can do something bespoke. We need to think about all the partnerships, all the people that are going forward. So over the 30 years, over our 30 plus years, we've now really systematically made that happen, and that's why we protect that architecture so strongly, to make sure that you get that compatibility, that you have that consistency, that you have that tool chain, and that we're taking that forward. And if anybody invests in that, they know they're going to get that multiplication effect, or almost a network effect on top of it.
Yeah.
And so we continue to invest, and in fact, one of the things we've done post-IPO is actually considerably increase our developer investments, and you're going to see even more things coming from us in that space, because we're realizing that that is one of the things that's really holding back the world from the computing that it needs.
I think that's very well stated. On that note, I'm going to ask you my final question. This has been an awesome interview, Chris. When we're chatting at Mobile World Congress next year, what do you hope to be able to say then that you can't yet say today?
That's a good question. What do I hope I can say? I hope that I can say that ARM is making a significant impact in democratizing AI. I'm just passionate about it. I just think it is, the opportunity is huge. I just see how far we've come from, where you can run, any of these most advanced expert models on a handheld device, and just what that can change, how that can change the way people do things. And I'm quite sure it's not going to be my generation, but it's I'm looking at the way students. I have a son in college, and he literally uploads his notes into ChatGPT, and it asks him test questions for him to be prepared for a test. Like, I would never thought of that, like that's a use case or something.
Yeah.
So I just think we put this in the people's hands. They're going to do amazing things with it, and we're going to make the world a better place. That's what I'm hoping to feel.
Beautiful note, love that, and absolutely great examples. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time on a busy week.
Really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and thank you, Dave. This one was a blast. You know how much I love nerding out on this one. I hope all of you enjoyed this as much as we did. We're here in Barcelona, Spain, day 3 of MWC. My name's Savannah Peterson. You're watching theCUBE, the leading source for enterprise tech news.